In today's Behind the Beauty, we'll delve into the history of the iconic beauty brand Lush. From the founding out of the ashes of a failed business to its humble beginnings and rise to global recognition, Lush's story has been nothing if not intriguing. The founders of Lush have crafted an identity for the brand focused on their handmade, eco-friendly products, sustainable practices, and environmental activism. And it's a strategy that's worked really well for them. But for a brand built on a foundation of ethics and morality, they've also become known for a few bits of controversy and criticism. Chapter 1: Before Lush. Lush's origin story goes back considerably further than the founding of the actual brand. In fact, two of its co-founders, Mark Constantine and Liz Weir, first met in the 1970s while working at a beauty salon in Poole, England. I don't know why I said it like that, it's Poole, not Pole. Mark, a trichologist, specialized in hair and scalp disorders, while Liz was a beauty therapist. And they discovered that they had a shared passion for natural and ethical beauty products, and this led them to start their own cosmetics business together. They started out by making natural hair and skincare products from home, but their big break came in 1977 after they sent samples of those products to Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop. I feel like we talk about The Body Shop in every single video. I feel like it's just got so many links to the beauty industry everywhere. Fortunately, she really liked them, so they started selling their products to Anita Roddick, and before long, they were The Body Shop's biggest supplier. According to Constantine, his company made pretty much all of The Body Shop's products at one point. They had a really close working relationship with Roddick for many years, helping to create some of The Body Shop's most popular products. However, this all changed in 1991. The way their relationship ended isn't entirely clear. Some reports say that they had a dispute with Roddick over the intellectual property rights of the products they had been creating. Apparently, The Body Shop had become concerned that they didn't actually own the rights to the formulations and many of its own products. Whereas other reports say that Constantine and Weir's company was experiencing financial difficulties, but no one really knows. Whatever the real reason was, the result was Roddick buying Constantine Weir's company in 1991, though the figure paid is also not clear, with some reports claiming it was 6 million and others claiming it was 17 million. Again, no one really knows. After the sale, Constantine joined forces with his wife Margaret and used some of the money he earned from the sale of their company to start a new mail order company called Cosmetics2Go. Terrible name. What a shit name. They sold a wide range of beauty products, including a variety of other brands, as well as their own branded products. Maybe like Avon or something, but it was initially very successful, but the company actually collapsed in 1994, apparently due to overwhelming demand and operational issues. Some said that the prices were too low, far too low, and that Constantine had just misjudged the running cost behind the scenes. However, others had suggested that he let the brand fail at the end because he knew the mail order market was dying, and he wanted to take what he had learned from this company and start fresh with a new one with a more sustainable business model, which is what he'd go on to do. Part of what fueled this idea was that Constantine and Weir had apparently both signed a non-competition agreement when they left The Body Shop, which was enforced until 1994. So this basically meant that they couldn't create any companies that would be in direct competition with The Body Shop. The mail order business was different enough that it didn't kind of go against this contract, against this agreement, but it wasn't what they wanted to do long term. Chapter 2: Founding of Lush. So Constantine and Weir joined forces again, and Lush was launched in 1995. They were joined this time by several other co-founders, including Mark's wife Margaret, or Mo, as well as several other people they worked with in their previous companies. They opened their first Lush store in Poole, England, which is Constantine's hometown. Interestingly enough, the name was actually picked from a customer competition, which was run in their newsletter. How they had a newsletter without a company name, I'm not sure how that worked. I don't really know what went on there, but the name was meant to signify freshness and juiciness, which aligns with the company's ethos of natural and fresh products. When Lush was launched, it was known for pioneering fresh handmade cosmetics. Their products had short shelf lives and used minimal to no preservatives, which was a fairly revolutionary idea in the 1990s. Their stores were also unique, being designed to look like fresh food markets, another nod towards the branding of fresh products made from natural fruit and vegetables. stores. As I'm saying it, it sounds like an awful idea, but obviously it's done well. The new company was popular from the very start, and Constantine & Co. didn't rest on their laurels. Within a year, they'd opened 2 more stores in London, and from there they expanded globally. First with stores in Canada in 1996, followed by Croatia, then Australia in 1997, as well as Brazil in 1999, and Ireland in the year 2000. The brand's early days were a huge success, with customers obsessing over their colourful and unique products, the smell of the shop, as well as their ethical and natural branding, and their deli-style shop layouts, which allowed customers to sample and try out products before buying based on the weight of what they bought. I forgot to mention, I used to work for Lush. It was my second university job after working in a bar, which I was terrible at, but I really did enjoy Lush. But a huge thing of shopping in Lush and working at Lush was to encourage people to experience the products. Be like, come on, wash your hands. We wash so many people's hands. So many people's hands, rubbing products on people, which looking back now could have been a nightmare for allergies, but I'll talk more about my experience working there as we go along. But yes, this deli style experience was a huge part of shopping there. Wrapping up your produce at the end with a sticker with the weight and everything on it. It was like buying meat. They also started strong with some of their most iconic products actually being launched very early on, particularly with their legendary bath bombs, which were launched in 1999. These bath bombs were actually created by Mo Constantine during their cosmetics to go era, their mail order era, but the bath bomb went on to become a cornerstone of Lush's brand identity, if not one of the only products that people know Lush for. Another popular early product was their solid shampoo bars, another creation from Mo, which became hugely popular for the brand. These were also originally created during the Cosmetics to Go era before being relaunched as a Lush product. They were created in an attempt to reduce waste from plastic packaging and were one of the first zero waste beauty items on the market. They remain incredibly popular to this day, as do many of the brand's early products. This was one of Lush's main selling points, with a lot of their products being formulated to be packaging free in order to reduce waste and a more environmentally friendly take on the cosmetics industry, a trend which was rapidly growing in popularity amongst consumers at the time. They kind of got in there when people were, really talking about global warming, everything being organic, your cosmetics having chemicals in. They really got in there at the right time. Chapter 3, Growth Skyrockets. Capitalizing on their impressive start, Lush went from strength to strength in the early 2000s. Within a short time, they'd outdone many of their more established competitors, and their growth rate was faster than that of The Body Shop in its early stages. That is saying something, because back then, The Body Shop was the go-to place for Bath and Body stuff. Not Bath and Body Works, but things were going so well for the brand that they even attracted interest from Estee Lauder, who approached Constantine to acquire the brand in the early 2000s. However, this approach was turned down, as was a later approach from LVMH, who were also interested in acquiring Lush. Constantine said that he found his founding partners were tempted to take the LVMH deal, but ultimately they decided that they'd never find anywhere else they'd be allowed to be as creative and have so much control and have as much fun as they did at Lush. By 2007, there were 462 Lush stores in 46 different countries, with a combined annual revenue of around 160 million. Despite their huge success and rapid expansion, Lush was still being run out of an office above their first shop in Poole, and most of the machinery they used to make their products was actually repurposed catering equipment, including a sausage stuffing machine and a muffin maker, which kind of makes sense when you look at a lot of their products. Their success was really owed in no small part to the creativity of Mark's wife Mo, so many M's, who created a lot of their most popular products, apparently coming up with the formulas in their garden shed. As I mentioned earlier, Mo was the creator of Lush's famous bath bombs, a hugely successful product for Lush, which they apparently sold 9 million of alone in 2006. And all this was achieved despite the fact that Lush are well known for avoiding traditional advertising methods like TV or print ads. Instead, they relied heavily on word of mouth, driven by their in-store experience and ethical activism, not just in-store, behind the brand, brand, but all the campaigns that they used in order to promote their brand. This strategy worked really, really well for them from the start, but it really came into its own when social media, especially Instagram, became more popular. Many of their fans, often referred to as Lushies, will promote the brand online for free, for absolutely free, and for a while you couldn't open Instagram or YouTube without seeing a video of like one of their bath bombs being dropped into a bath and all the colors, and they made good Instagram posts. They were kind of like the opposite of Glossier, not minimal looking, very maximalist looking. Social media helped propel Lush to even greater heights, and in 2013, they achieved an annual turnover of 419 million. This was just the beginning though, as Lush continued to make the most of their user-generated marketing through the 2010s. They also released more popular products such as their Slapstick Solid Foundation, which launched in 2014. Again, they aimed to minimize packaging waste by creating a solid, naked foundation as part of its growing zero waste product line. Not sure how well it did. I think people were impressed. I don't really know. But in 2015, Lush opened its largest store globally on Oxford Street in London, featuring 200 new products exclusive to the location. Now, I used to work in the Cheltenham store, which was kind of near Paul actually, and it was really, really tiny. And then when I moved to London, I worked for Top Man in Oxford Street, rest in peace. And I remember when this opened, it was a huge deal because it was huge, massive, and it was always busy. Oxford Street being like the retail area to go when you are in London. By 2016, the brand had begun experimenting with digital innovations, launching something called Lush Lens, which allowed customers to scan products in store with an app to get product information, further reducing the need for packaging. All this combined meant that in just 4 years, they managed to double their annual turnover, reaching the highest they've ever achieved in a single year, with 995 million in 2017. By this point, they had nearly 1,000 stores operating across 50 different countries. I also forget how popular they are in Korea as well. They're huge in Korea. Chapter 4, Charity Work and Ethics. As we've discussed, a major factor in Lush's success over the last few decades has been their focus on creating an ethical beauty brand. They've launched a long list of schemes and programs over the years, as well as honoring their policies to improve their substantial and ethical practices. One of the most prominent examples of this is Lush's stance on animal testing. The brand has been very vocal against animal testing since the very start, and it's something they're very vocal about still to this day as a brand. Since they launched, their policy has been that they will never conduct animal tests on their finished products, and that they only purchase ingredients from companies that don't test on animals either. They fully stuck to this policy by refusing to sell their products in any countries that require animal testing, which is why they don't and probably will never sell in China. Lush also emphasizes ethical sourcing, avoiding materials associated with environmental harm or unethical labor practices. This will seem a little bit ironic later when we talk about some of their controversies. They apparently use fair trade and organic ingredients and aim to reduce their carbon footprint by sourcing locally when possible. And you do actually see that when you do a deeper dive into their ingredients, like a lot of their ingredients are sourced locally to Paul. They also state that their products are 100% vegetarian, with 95% of their year-round products being vegan as well. We've also seen their commitment to sustainability with a focus on naked products, their wide range of products which are packaging free. These include, as we mentioned, solid shampoos, conditioners, body butters, and bath bombs. This concept was pretty innovative when they introduced it back in the 90s, and it continues to be something they work on, trying to make as many products as possible packaging free. And I can't really name another brand that does this, really. When they do have to use packaging for their products, Lush tries to focus on using eco-friendly materials for their packaging, including recycled plastic and biodegradable options. They use a lot of like scarves, like to wrap things up, a lot of like tins, all being like reusable or recyclable. Customers can also return these knot wraps to stores in exchange for 50% off a new knot wrap. And this return and exchange model is one that Lush likes to use quite often. They launched their Bring It Back scheme in 2021, recycling initiative program, which encourages customers to return empty Lush packaging to stores for recycling. I don't know why I'm speaking so fast, sorry. This initiative is part of the brand's commitment to reducing waste, promoting sustainability sustainability and creating a more circular economy. The scheme allows customers to return any full-size Lush plastic packaging to their stores in exchange for a reward. Lush already had a recycling scheme in place, which meant that customers who return 5 empty black pots used for like their creams, their fresh face masks, and a few other products, you bring back 5, you receive a free fresh face mask as a thank you for recycling. But the new Bring It Back scheme adds on to that, meaning for every piece of packaging returned under the program, customers can also receive 50p credit towards their next purchase. And that's pretty good. That can add up to like a soap or whatever they make. And these iconic black pots have been a key focus of the recycling program for years. The pots are completely recyclable and made from 100% recyclable plastic. Once returned, the black pots are sent back to Lush's Green Hub in the UK, where they are cleaned, shredded, and remolded into new black pots, creating a closed-loop recycling system. Before the Bring It Back scheme launched, their Green Hub site was already recycling over 500,000 black pots every year, and that number has increased since the launch of their new scheme, with the brand recycling 2.27 million pieces of packaging between 2021 and 2024. Aside from their recycling programs, Lush also donates to various causes using proceeds from its charity pot, hand and body lotion, which was introduced in 2007. 100% of the price of the lotion, minus taxes, is donated to various charities, which changes every so often. Through this program, they've contributed millions to human rights, environmental causes, and animal protection organizations, and they really do push for these charities. When I worked there, these organizations, we were taught so much about them, told why they were chosen, and really made a push to advertise the charity pot. And luckily for them, it was a firm favorite anyway. It was kind of an icon of the brand and people genuinely loved the product. But in addition to that, the brand is also known for partnering with small grassroots groups and avoiding large charities with high administrative costs. Lush also regularly runs campaigns to support causes such as animal rights, LGBTQ+ rights, environmental justice, and human rights. And these are often controversial, which we'll get into in a minute, but they're integral to the brand's identity. Integral. These include their 2015 collaboration with All Out, which involved the launch of their Love Soap, which was a gold glittery bar of soap with #GayIsOK written on it, with the proceeds this time going to Equality Florida, which is a civil rights organization dedicated to securing full equality for Florida's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. Other notable campaigns include their Save the Arctic campaign, launched in collaboration with Greenpeace. This aimed to protect the Arctic from oil drilling and climate change. The campaign included innovative in-store displays such as melting ice sculptures and body painting events, in an attempt to raise awareness about how climate change is impacting Arctic wildlife and indigenous communities as well. And their Fight for Trans Rights campaign, which launched in 2018, focused on raising awareness about the discrimination and challenges faced by the transgender and non-binary community. They partnered with organizations like the National Center for Transgender Equality and Transgender Law Center, with a campaign raising over $450,000 through sales of their Inner Truth bath melt. They've also been involved in anti-oil drilling efforts, beach cleanups, and the protection of many other wildlife habitats. When I worked for Lush, they were doing a campaign against fox hunting. It wasn't just Lush, but people all throughout the UK were pushing for a ban on fox hunting. I remember they did this amazing display in the windows, but where I was working in Cheltenham, there was quite a big fox hunting group. And I worked with some very passionate people who at the time knew a lot about this cause. I didn't. I was 19. I didn't care about anything beyond my fashion magazines and getting drunk at the weekend at that time, but I was learning so much through these people. And we would have counter protests outside the store. We'd have locals who took part in fox hunting coming in and trying to debate us about the cause, why they should be allowed to carry on fox hunting. As I said, I had no idea, but the people who worked for Lush really did have a passion for these charities that Lush were representing. A lot of people who not only work in Lush, but buy from Lush also identify as queer. So a lot of these charities really hit home for a lot of people and they were very passionate about them. So I truly believe, as much as I don't love the brand and love their products, I truly believe that this passion is genuine. And you can see that throughout not just the people who work higher up in the offices, but the people who actually work for the brand too. Chapter 5: Controversies and Criticisms. A chapter we have to have in every Behind the Beauty. As mentioned, some of their campaigns have led to criticism from some groups of people for a variety of reasons. One of the most prominent examples of this, I would say, was their launch of their Fighting Animal Testing campaign in 2012. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why being against animal testing could possibly have led to controversy for the brand. The criticism they received wasn't necessarily about the message, but about the provocative way in which it was presented. The campaign was launched after a ban on animal testing entered the EU law in 1993. However, following lobbying by other cosmetic companies, the regulations were never fully enforced, being delayed for decades. Lush wanted to call out these cosmetic companies as well as governing bodies for delaying the ban. The campaign included turning the shop window of their London Regent Street store into a live performance, showing the cruelty of animal testing. A woman wearing a flesh-coloured leotard was seen withering in pain as a man in a white lab coat performed tests on her. And she was subjected to versions of the test done on animals during cosmetics testing, including being force-fed, having toxicity tests performed on her eyes and scalp, and being injected with a saline solution, all while on display for shoppers to watch. The graphic nature of the campaign led to criticism by some, but many also supported the brand's message and a strong stance against animal testing. I'm gonna say, I usually leave my personal opinions out of this, but sometimes I think it takes something like that, a really strong message to really drive it home to people. Another controversial campaign of theirs was their 2018 Spy Cops campaign. This campaign was related to a public inquiry into claims of wrongdoing by undercover police officers who infiltrated activist groups in England and Wales. The launch came in the middle of an ongoing public inquiry into undercover policing, and Lush said it was intended to highlight that female activists on environmental and social issues were tricked by covert officers into having long-term relationships with them, thinking that they had the same values. Some of the women even had children with the undercover officers before finding out the truth. And in some cases, the undercover officers took the names of dead babies as part of their fake profiles. The women involved were campaigning for more information on the officers to be released and wanted a panel of experts to assist the inquiry chairman. This seems like a perfectly reasonable request given that they've been tricked into a romantic or and even sexual relationship with police officers who'd been lying to them, tricked into having a family, a whole life with them. Lush says that the campaign was designed to urge the Home Secretary at the time to listen to activists who believed the inquiry was protecting officers and essentially sweeping it under the rug. The campaign involved changing store window displays to feature an image of a man dressed as both a police officer and in plain clothes, alongside the words "paid to lie," as well as fake police tape saying police have crossed the line. Customers were also asked to sign a petition and postcards calling for support for the women activists involved. They received significant backlash from law enforcement and some members of the public too. Lush were accused of being anti-police, and it led to a social media outcry and a temporary dip in public perception. Lush later clarified that the campaign was aimed at the abuse of police power and not at the police force itself. They also stated that it aimed to highlight this small and secretive subset of undercover policing that undermines and threatens the very idea of democracy. The campaign was meant to run for 3 weeks, but was suspended early, with Lush saying that it was for the safety of our staff, after apparently receiving complaints from staff that former police officers had been threatening them. They said that whilst intimidation of our shop staff from ex-police officers and unhelpful tweets from those in high office were ongoing, not all of our shops feel able to have the campaign window in their shops. In addition to the controversies caused by some of their campaigns, Lush have also received criticism for some of their charity donations. In 2021, Lush came under fire for its ties to the organisation Women's Place UK, or WP UK, a group that has been accused by some LGBTQAI+ activists of promoting views that are hostile towards trans rights. The group's opposition to certain aspects of the gender self-identification laws sparked accusations of transphobia, although WP UK maintains it's advocating for the rights of women, including transgender women. It was reported that Lush had donated funds to WP UK under its Charity Pot program, WP UK being one of those grassroots charities that they support. When this connection came to light, many people from the LGBTQAI+ community, activists, customers, and even staff members expressed concern as they viewed WP UK's stance on gender identity issues as being harmful to the trans community. Lush faced significant backlash from the queer community as a whole, with a lot of people demanding clarification on why the company, known for its inclusive stance and support for the queer community and queer rights, was supporting an organization some considered to be anti-trans. After the controversy gained traction, Lush released a statement explaining that they did not intend to fund any anti-trans groups and would conduct an internal review of its donation practices. They emphasized their commitment to trans rights and clarified that they would no longer support organizations that are seen as harmful to the LGBTQAI+ community. They also reaffirmed their stance on trans inclusivity and equality. However, this incident did affect its public perception again temporarily, particularly among its LGBTQAI customer base, but Lush has since taken steps to reinforce its support for inclusivity. The brand has even faced criticism regarding their natural branding, though this criticism seems to be, mostly stem from a misunderstanding of the company's claims. Or clever marketing. Lush's marketing actually emphasizes the use of fresh, ethically sourced, and natural ingredients, which leads to many of their customers to assume that the brand is 100% natural, which isn't true. It's not. In fact, Lush are pretty transparent about the fact that not all their ingredients are 100% natural. They openly state on their website that they use synthetic ingredients in some of their products to prevent microbial growth and to extend the shelf life of some of their products. For example, synthetic fragrances and preservatives like methylparaben and propylparaben are used in certain products, which is surprising because parabens is something that the clean beauty and natural beauty community seem to be very, very against. But Lush are pretty transparent about this and their ingredients overall. They do provide a full list of ingredients on the product packaging as well as its website, with clear indicators for which ones are natural and which ones are synthetic. Natural ingredients are often listed in green, while synthetic ones are in black. Despite this, critics will say that the language used by the brand in their marketing is misleading and that the use of synthetic ingredients doesn't match the company's heavy emphasis on fresh and organic materials, which I get. It's clever marketing. They know what they're doing. But in response to concerns over synthetic preservatives, Lush introduced a range of self-preserving products that are free of synthetic preservatives. These formulations use natural alternatives to extend shelf life, although not all products are able to use these natural preservatives. And the brand's ethics have also come into question when it comes to worker conditions. Despite the brand advocating for ethical labor practices and only sourcing ingredients from suppliers with acceptable working conditions, Lush has actually faced accusations of mistreating its own staff in the past, with former employees alleging poor working conditions. In 2020, The Guardian released an article regarding poor working conditions in one of Lush's factories, including complaints about unsafe work environments and mistreatment. Workers at Lush's Sydney factory claimed that they had suffered physical injuries and had developed breathing difficulties due to alleged poor working conditions in the chain's factory. The Guardian spoke to 3 people who worked for Lush at the time, who claimed that they had suffered back and wrist injuries and that they were given personal work quotas which required them to lift the equivalent of 500 kilograms of dry materials a day without appropriate equipment. One worker said, "One of the most concerning injuries was I had a pinched nerve. It kind of disabled my legs for about half an hour. I literally fell on the floor and there was nobody in the room. So I had to crawl to the manager's desk to get up on a chair and wait for someone to come in." The Guardian reported that the staff at the factory had asked the company to provide trolleys to wheel heavy ingredients. Seems pretty obvious, right? But that request had been denied by management for some reason. Another worker also claimed in the article that he saw another employee, a man in his 40s, fall and hit his head, but claimed factory management at the time refused to call an ambulance. A Christmas casual a few years ago slipped on a wet floor and hit his head on the side of a metal table, and he sort of had a split in his hair where it was gushing blood, this other person said. They basically flat out refused to call an ambulance. The workers Workers also claimed that the COVID pandemic led to a shortage of the protective masks that they usually used. This meant that they had to work for months with only surgical masks, which do not protect them against the inhalation of dust particles, which is a serious concern in that kind of environment with all those bath bombs and the bubble bath bars as well. 2 workers also told Guardian Australia that they felt harassed and bullied. Their complaints also included sexual harassment and homophobic comments. They say that these complaints were not adequately dealt with by the company. They told The Guardian that they don't trust them to handle grievances anymore. The Guardian reported that one worker complained that they had been sexually harassed by another co-worker who followed her to her car after work on multiple occasions. But she says that the company's response was not good enough. She says they pretty much had a mediation session, which I didn't really want to do. She said, if someone stalked me to my car and stares at me every day, the last thing I want to do is sit at a table with our managers and try to sort it out. Why should I try and sort it out? She says he's the one doing the bad stuff. And apparently he got away with this as well by basically saying I didn't do it, and the woman never got the chance to present any evidence. Another worker told reporters that one member of staff said some pretty vile and homophobic things to another member of staff. They say this was explained to HR and she admitted to it, but she still continued to work for the company, even after admitting it. After this article came out, several former employees also spoke out about their experiences working with the brand, complaining about the brand's cult-like environment, poor management, the weird policy of having to massage products into customers' skin without really asking them first, and much more. Let me talk about this. So back when I worked for Lush, I personally found touching strangers, I don't mind touching people. I'm an affectionate person. I don't mind at all. But a lot of people don't, which is absolutely fair. That's like not the norm. But we were forced so much to touch people, and they never said flirt with them, but they would kind of like make them feel, you know, like they want to try the products, have good eye contact, all things that I dreaded doing because it clearly made a lot of people feel very, very uncomfortable. But this is encouraged, and you'll know when you go into a Lush store, you are pounced on by the staff. And I used to do it as someone that worked there. It's kind of like you can back off a little bit, but the whole idea is to make people buy the products by getting them to interact with the products, because back in the day, it stems from back in the day of not actually advertising anywhere but in store. When my first manager left, a Christmas temp who was incredible, had a lot of retail management experience, then became manager. She definitely had an experience with this cult-like behavior, and it's not just in the workplace either. A lot of consumers are going to be angry with this video because I said one negative thing about the brand. There is a real cult-like following. My manager went to a big conference, I guess you can say, where they're told a lot about, at the time, the new products being launched. It was around Christmas time, so there's a lot going on. For business reasons, you weren't allowed your phone in this meeting, right? Which is absolutely fine. She had 2 children at home who she had to leave with a babysitter that day. Feeling her phone vibrate, she had to leave the conference and answer her phone for the babysitter. Left the conference, was on the phone, put her phone away. A group of people came running out. They weren't higher ups, they were just a group of fellow retail management. Hounded her about why she was on her phone. Did she take pictures? Asking to see her phone. She explained her situation, but they wouldn't have it. Ended up taking the phone off her, asking her to unlock it. They then saw that she didn't have any pictures, and they just kind of like left the situation, carried on back in the conference. And I remember coming back from that and saying there was a real unsettling feeling around the whole thing, around the whole situation. She felt like the higher ups were very cliquey. It felt like a cult. A month later, she was gone. She just didn't want to work for the company anymore. Or allegedly, of course. Now, I've discussed these controversies before, in particular, the donation of funds to the WP UK via their charity pot. I'm just mentioning about how a lot of the community feel like they're a transphobic group. In my comments, somebody said that they worked for Lush and that they were going to start legal action. They were like, I'm going to talk to my manager and they're going to start legal action. They said they worked at like Lush HQ. I replied saying, do whatever the fuck you want. I will come with you with legal action too, because I'm just reporting what is public knowledge. They were very passionate, along with a few other people, and it wasn't for either side. It wasn't on the side of the charity. It wasn't on the side of trans people. It was just the fact that I was discussing Lush as a brand. They didn't want any negativity to be said about it, so much so that they commented on my channel on behalf of a manager of Lush, like one of the higher ups. I think it was even a CEO, saying that they're going to press legal action. And then they had to email the next day apologizing. So I get this cult-like mentality. You get this with a lot of brands. Whenever I talk shit about a brand, someone in the comments was like, I don't care what you say. I'm going to use a product. Whatever, fine. That's not the point of these videos. But Lush in particular does seem to have a very passionate cult-like following, in my opinion. Chapter 6, The State of Lush Today. These controversies, combined with a number of other factors, have started to see an impact on the reputation and growth of the brand. Lush's annual turnover has dropped steadily since its peak in 2017, falling to $816 million in 2023, a drop of $179 million. They even stopped being profitable in 2020, and that has continued, with the brand experiencing operating losses of $30 million in 2023. This decline in revenue was also partly due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, which forced Lush to temporarily close many of its physical stores during lockdown. Despite their recent financial troubles, the brand has remained focused on sustainability, their use of ethical ingredients, and their aim to reduce their carbon footprint. They've also continued to launch new activism campaigns and ethical policies, and in November of 2021, Lush revealed that they had decided to leave social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok in protest against the negative impact that these platforms have on mental health. The company said that they decided to prioritize customer well-being over marketing through these channels, and that the boycott would continue until the platforms take action to provide a safer environment for its users. In a statement, the brand said, in the same way that evidence against climate change was ignored and belittled for decades, concerns about the serious effects of social media are going largely ignored. They say Lush is taking matters into its own hands and addressing the issue now, not waiting around until others believe in the problem before changing its own behavior. This stance on social media was praised by a lot of fans. However, some pointed out that this felt a little disingenuous, and that's because Lush may not post themselves on these social media sites anymore, but they still have an internal team who are paid to get their products into the hands of influencers who can make them go viral. So they're claiming social media is bad for mental health and that they're coming off all platforms while still encouraging others to do their marketing for them. What I will say about this, my own personal opinion, is Lush did have a very good social media where you were able to see their customers, their consumers, models of all different backgrounds, a very diverse group of people. And that's what social media needs more of, not removing from. I get what they're saying, but I also think if they had stuck around for a lot longer, they can be part of the change on social media instead of just blanking it completely. In 2024, they also launched a new campaign highlighting the plight of human rights here in the UK. The campaign was created in partnership with charity Each Other, who released a paper detailing what it described as threats to human rights here in the UK. Talking about the campaign, Lush said, in the UK, we are faced with a worrying and sustained attack on our essential human rights, from the right to protest to the right to hold the government to account. These rights exist to protect us, but are especially important to protect those who are already marginalized and therefore more likely to suffer abuse and exploitation. And this is all great, but the problem is that they are just kind of like one click away from another controversy. And over the years, their critics have aimed less at their unapologetically confrontational campaigning style and more at the brand's questionable decisions, which appear to go against the morals they allegedly built the brand on. In the last few years, Lush North America began receiving criticism for union busting and poor working conditions. In September of 2020, Lush workers in Toronto launched a campaign to unionize. Employees complained about having their voices stifled by the company, facing retaliation for speaking out, receiving pay well below a living wage, and unfairly bearing some employees from stability and benefits by abusing the company's seasonal contract policies. In response, Lush handed out anti-union leaflets, held captive audience meetings, and allegedly targeted union organizers. This is in contrast to the company's ethical buying policy, which states the importance of collective bargaining. Workers United Canada Council, the union representing Lush workers, filed charges against the company in both the United States and Canada. The charges allege that the company's actions in response to the union organizing drive, as well as retaliation against individual employees, was unlawful. And in 2022, Lush apparently thought it'd be a really good idea to pay its managers $5 million in bonuses, despite taking $5.1 million in government support and recording a 90% drop in profits. Many questioned why the brand was using taxpayer-funded government money to pay their managers bonuses, and why the managers were getting bonuses at all when the brand was doing so poorly. Today, Lush is of course still a hugely popular brand with stores all over the world and an army of fans. Sales may have slowed a bit, in the recent years, but many put this down to the effects of COVID and Brexit, and are confident that they'll be back on track soon. That may well be the case, but it seems that where Lush have really taken a hit isn't so much in their finances, but in their reputation. Their critics are being given more ammunition to complain about the brand almost every single year, and many former fans are starting to question if the brand they loved is really what they thought it was to begin with. The trouble with building your whole brand around your moral and ethical superiority is that even your small mistakes will be scrutinized harder than they would have been for other brands. And Lush moved on from making small mistakes a long time ago. Squashing employees' attempts at unionizing is not a good look for an ethical brand. Ignoring employees' reports of sexual harassment and bullying in the workplace is not a good look for any brand, especially a supposedly ethical one. Paying your management large bonuses with government money during a time of financial strain is definitely not a good look for an ethical brand. And of course, all this has led many to ask, is Lush really an ethical brand, or was it all just clever marketing?